The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
All right, I'm Kelvin Hepner with Real Agriculture, joined by Brunel Sabourin of Antara Agronomy for this edition or episode of the Canola School. And Brunel, we've seen some issues when it comes to crusting and obstacles facing those small canola plants in parts of Western Canada, including here in southern Manitoba this spring. Can you take us through what we're looking at in this field?
For sure. So in this field, this was a field of corn last year. Last fall, we received about 15 inches of rain in the last week of September, which made things extremely wet. The producer did not harvest this field until things froze over, so he waited. But we weren't able to work any of the corn trash in last fall because the ground was already frozen too hard. So the end result was we had a top 6 inches that was really wet, and then the corn trash on top of that, and a really cool spring this spring that the field just wouldn't dry. So in a case like this, we were hoping that we would be able to incorporate some amount of residue this spring maybe. That wasn't the case because that top 6 inches was so dry, so wet. In these clays, the water doesn't move through the profile very fast. So the producer elected to burn this field. Now, because things were so wet, we only had about 50% of the field that burnt properly. So the next step or tool in the toolbox was pull out the heavy harrows. This field was heavy harrowed at least once. It was sulfured once or twice, just trying to incorporate that residue in management. But the end result right now and what we're seeing here is there's a lot of corn trash worked into that top 4 or 6 inches, which makes for a very uneven seed bed, plus the mud and whatnot. So this spring, we were desperately trying to get the fields to dry up so that we could plant them in a timely fashion, but then we did not receive any rainfall for 2, if not 3 weeks after the field was planted. So what we've been left with is a bit of an uneven stand. Now, it did help that we used a planter to put the canola in here so we could place the seed properly into moisture, find that moisture, and try to get it to germinate as evenly as possible. But now that we did get that rain, the rest of the seed that was stuck in the dry is coming, but it's having to fight through this crust now that our heavy clays tend to form. When we work a field or overwork a field and make it black, we don't have what the soil armour, so when the rain hits it, it tends to break up these fine clays and create a layer that seals off, and then it bakes in the sun and becomes these hard lumps of clay that canola has a terrible, tough time trying to push through or push around.
And in a field like this where a good number of the plants are already up, there's not really anything you can do to break up that crusting.
No, like there's discussions in other crops of rotary hoes or even
coil packers. I've heard
coil packers, or even rolling the field with a land roller just to try to break up the crust. Those have their own sets of issues, I guess, with your wind erosion afterwards. That's where having a timely rain after seeding to get everything going on time erases a lot of our sins. But if we hadn't had the rain, there would have been no germination. And that maybe is another point to discuss, that if your canola is kind of half sitting in the dry soil, sometimes if there's just enough moisture to get it going, it'll germinate, but then it dries up. Or you hope that the seed stays dry enough in the furrow that seed doesn't germinate until it does get adequate rainfall, that it can germinate and actually sprout and emerge.
So in a field like this where we do have some patchy emergence, thin emergence in areas like this, what do you recommend to a grower in terms of how we manage or follow this field through the season?
Well, right now we have plenty enough of a plant stand that we will get an adequate crop. Like even with the late ones coming, even if we wouldn't have had that late germination, I think we still would be more than okay. But it's something that a farmer has to keep it back in their mind when they're seeding, that if you've got uneven conditions, dry conditions, it's not a good time to be cutting rates. You might want to up your planting rate, your seeding rates, just to have more seed in the ground and have that insurance. With a lot of guys that are planting and with the disc drills, some guys are pushing the rates pretty low where, we're targeting 5 to 8 plants per square foot. The Canola Council recommends a minimum of 4. So This spring we fought frost, we fought flea beetles, grasshoppers, emergence issues. It's really got to be taken by case, and wind, for sure, wind too. It's had its challenges.
Yeah. One point, maybe not necessarily related to crusting, but you mentioned with planters you were able to push the seed in deeper. That little canola seed can handle being pushed deeper than the 1/2 to 1 inch, or what the recommended depth normally is?
It seems to be, yeah. So my theory on it is, we've had guys that have 10 plus years experience planting canola in the valley here, and it was on their recommendation that they said go chase the moisture. In some cases, like last year was very dry, we targeted at least 1.5 inches, if not 1.75 inches depth, trying to find that moisture. And always having been told canola should be 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch at the most, I was a little bit leery about that, but it all came up picket fence. So my thoughts are, I guess, not having that on-row packing on top of the furrow leaves it open, that the canola is able to pop out pretty quick and off to the races. So,
all right. Well, thanks for your time again, Brunel.
For sure.